Welcome into Appalachia at ya. This must have been amateur this morning. Oh, had some technical difficulty, but we are back, and we went a little feral there a while ago, but now we're going to try it again. This is Appalachia at ya, episode 4. Well, today we have fish brains and a bad bass. Got to enunciate that, bad bass, to talk about today. We have a special guest, Fisheries Agent, and my good friend Justin Hargrove. We're going to talk about Sturgeon Fest, and we're going to talk about living with bears, and of course we'll give you some gardening tips and updates, hobby farming, to settle your ease down here in the southern Appalachians on this beautiful day in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. Let's dive in. All right, folks, welcome to the day's show. Back again. You could see me last time, but you couldn't hear me. Hopefully you can hear me this time. But let's talk a little bit about hobby farming to kick off the show, like I always do, some stuff that you could do. And I would like to talk about lettuce. Lettuce is a good fall crop. Have you ever planted iceberg lettuce and like you ones you see in the store, only to be disappointed by the results? Well, there are many other lettuce types that grow well and taste great from the Tennessee garden. Fall can be a great time to grow lettuce in Tennessee from seed or transplant. Many leaf lettuce cultivars are well suited for home and garden. You can try Starfighter, Tropicana, Green Star, or New Red Fire. And don't be afraid to pick these cultivars and many others immature. Bib or Butterhead lettuce provides a softer leaf texture. It can be grown in green or red. Try Merlot, Nancy, or Red Cross for the red leaves. Oak leaf can provide great texture and color interest. Try Orchid or Pansy. Romaine can be a great fall lettuce or early spring. And there's several cultivars there. Also, for you hunters, you can plant some purple tops and things for deer. Turnip greens, deer eat the fire out of them. They really like them. I do too. I even like the turnips. I got a recipe. Tastes a lot like potatoes, but we have that and a lot more, and leafy crops for the Tennessee Vegetable Garden. We have a great publication. Come see your county ag agent. If you're in Blount County, that'd be me. But all counties have a county ag agent, so if you're interested in growing lettuce this fall, check those out. I also would like for you to consider cover crops. If you grow in gardens or if you have pastures, cover crops can be planted in the soil when otherwise be bare between crops or growing seasons, and it's beneficial to the soil and plant relationships as well. It can help with pathogen and weed management, and September is a great time to establish cover crops for overwintering. Consider legumes. Those are peas, beans, clovers, vetch, and alfalfa. They have root nodules that contain nitrogen-fixing bacteria, so it has to be fixated to be in the soil. So the nitrogen will be available for later crops when it's fixed by these legumes. Many cover crops are grasses. You can do cereal, rye, barley, and wheat and oats. That would be grain crops if grown maturity. They are grown because they're economical, easily established, and can produce large amounts of plant material in a relatively short period of time. These crops stabilize the soil, prevent soil erosion, and help break some plant diseases or pest cycles in addition to increasing organic matter. Buckwheat, rape, and radishes are examples of cover crops that are neither a grass nor legume. These crops increase organic matter, improve soil structure, and some brassicas, if you like those mustard seeds, have biofumigation properties, decomposing tissue that releases compounds to suppress pests or disease in the soil. And so consider lettuce. The plant of the month for the UT Gardens is goldenrod. So goldenrod is a wildflower. They make bees work it. They make honey that's aster honey late in the year, which is awfully dark. Some people doesn't like it. It's a tired taste. Bees love it. You can let them have that honey for over the winter if you don't like that. But goldenrod, you'll see it in beautiful color. You can incorporate that into your plantings if you wish. But that is the plant of the month. You can look at our UT Gardens page and find out more about goldenrod. I've helped people grow it. I've helped people try to get rid of it. Depends on your objective, as most things in this great industry of hobby farming and country living here in southern Appalachia. So today I want to introduce a great friend of mine. Let's dig right in and start talking about fish. All right, we have a special guest today on the Appalachia podcast. We have a good colleague of mine. He is an honorary Appalachian today. We have Justin Hargrove out of Benton County. For those that don't know where Benton County at, it is across the Tennessee River. It is up in what we call the western region of the state, and he is a agriculture agent, a fisheries agent, and one of my good friends, Justin Hargrove. Welcome this morning, Justin.
Thank you for having me, Ronnie. Glad to get to meet with you. Enjoyed working with you whenever you were over here in the western region, or as they say over here on the dark side, and worked with you several times on several different ponds and fisheries management exercises. And lo and behold, you left the western region and went to Florida, and they kind of cast me into that position. So I've got you to thank for some of the many questions that I oftentimes receive. So.
Well,
Discussing some of that with you and seeing where we can go with it.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're involved in fisheries? What do you do for folks in your region? You cover 31 counties in the eastern region. Yeah. Tell us what a typical fisheries call, if there is such a thing. Just tell us what you do as a fisheries agent.
Yes, sir. So as a fisheries agent, like Ronnie said, I cover 31 counties here in the western region of the state. And those calls range from anywhere from, we've got an old pond that's been kind of neglected. We've got leaks in it or trees on the levee. We need to try to renovate it and get it back to a usable state to where we can actually have some enjoyable fishing out of it. Get calls on ponds that are, maybe a new purchase and we don't know what the overall population looks like in that pond, in which case we can come out, do a seine. We can bring a shock boat and shock to see what species are present, what the predator-prey ratios are, and what the overall relationship that's going on there is. And then we can make some recommendations and management practices on how to try to bring that pond back into balance, whether that's just fishing it harder and getting that population back in balance there, or in some extreme cases, if we've got some non-native invasive species, we may have to do a total renovation with rope and gnome, kill everything out, and start from square one. So there's lots and lots of variety to the pond calls that I get. I guess probably the most common calls that I get are kind of geared toward weed control. Of course, we've got lots and lots of ponds here in the state of Tennessee. I would venture to say that just about every single one of them's got a little bit of filamentous algae in them. And so we get lots of filamentous algae phone calls, and then various other weed control measures as well, just trying to help landowners keep those ponds looking clean and pristine.
So you'd mentioned the filamentous algae. What does that look like on the water? I mean, algae, we see on the side of a fish tank or something, but what does that look like in the pond?
So with filamentous algae, a lot of times we'll have people call in and they'll refer to it as pond scum. So it's that green, snotty looking stuff that will form and eventually float up, and you can wind up with floating mats of this stuff. If you drag a lure through it, it's kind of like just dragging a lure through snot, just stringy, slimy, disgusting green algae. The thing of it is, we've got a few different species of it, I guess, that live here native to the state, Spirogyra and Phytophthora algae, and it actually starts its life cycle on the bottom of the pond. So if we've got ponds that have got clear water and sunlight is reaching down and hitting the bottom of those ponds, the algae actually starts growing on the bottom, and oftentimes we don't take much notice of it whenever it's actively growing. We take notice of it, or most landowners take notice of it, whenever it detaches from the bottom, floats up, and is floating in mats on top of the pond. At that point, we're a little bit too late in that particular weed's life cycle to treat it. Once it detaches from the bottom and it's floating in mats, it's actually going towards the end of its life cycle. There's no sense treating it at that point because it's already dying. It's going to break down, sink back to the bottom. As it decays, it's going to release a lot of phosphorus and it'll start that cycle right back over again, so long as it's getting sunlight. And so it's a cyclical kind of weed that we see. And it's all about timing as to whether or not we want to treat it, or how to treat it. Our very best treatment method on that algae is to treat it with a copper-based compound like copper sulfate. Trade name on something like that would be Q-Train Plus. The trick that we get into with treating with copper is that if our alkalinity in that pond is out of balance, you can actually wind up killing some fish. So that's why we always kind of err on the side of caution with treating for some of these pond weeds. We've got to be careful what we're treating with, when we're treating it, and at what dosages, because if we kill all of it at once, when that stuff decays, the microbes that's eating it up are using up quite a bit of dissolved oxygen. We can wind up killing fish that is, not because of the chemicals, but just because of the oxygen depletion. So it can get kind of in depth and in the weeds on weed management if we're not careful.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned something about, making sure the alkalinity is correct. So
Mhm.
fish are really good at sensing things in the water, right? So
Yes.
they have a lateral line that they can sense, and a little bit goes a long way in ponds, wouldn't you say, as far as treating a pond?
I would agree with that. A little goes a long way. You've got a confined and enclosed ecosystem there. It's kind of like if you walk into your house and somebody just burned a whole bunch of biscuits, you're going to be able to smell that and recognize that pretty quick. It's the same thing with those fish. They're getting all of their oxygen from that water, and whenever you start monkeying with that water, they're pretty sensitive to it. They pick up on that stuff quick, and if we're not careful, we can cause some issues pretty quick because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I was doing the job in West Tennessee, and as a county agent, still see a lot of pond questions. We see people calling when you see those mats that detach and they float on top of the water, and it's unsightly. But we also get a lot of different kind of weeds. I dealt with a lot of water shield, dollar bonnet. When I was in West Tennessee, certain counties had a lot of that primrose. Right.
Yeah.
So there's different herbicides for different kind of plants, right? There's emergent and there's fully aquatic, or what's the word I'm looking for, that's submerged.
With our plants, I like to try to break it down into 4 categories, and that's not me breaking it down. Really, I base a lot of this stuff off information from Texas A&M. But we've got emergent weeds, we've got submerged weeds. That's just aquatic vegetation that is growing completely underneath the surface of the water. And so with our emergent vegetation, that's going to be stuff like lily pads and whatnot. It's growing from the bottom, but it's coming up through the water and emerging from that water and growing up top. So things like lily pads, water primrose, various others. Stuff that's going to be submerged weeds, that's going to be things like coontail, hydrilla, southern naiad, a lot of that type stuff. Then we have got floating weeds. Those are weeds that are completely detached from the bottom of the pond, and they're just floating on the surface. So our most common ones on that is going to be watermeal and duckweed. And if you want to talk about a weed that's really tough to try to control and manage, watermeal and duckweed will sure give you some headache. And then we've got our algae. So we've got several different types of algae. We've talked about filamentous. We've also got yellow or golden algae, which we don't see very much of on this side of the state. We've also got, euglena, which is actually a protozoan, but it falls into the algae categories. Some folks will refer to it as a red algae, but it's just that red pond scum that we get across the top there. And then we've got our phytoplankton, or our phytoplanktonic algae, which is a little microscopic algae. It's actually the base of the food chain there in the pond. So phytoplankton, if we're really managing hard for fish, we want to have good phytoplankton blooms. That's going to be creating food sources for some of our reproduction that's going on in the pond. It's also going to be producing oxygen within that water column. So and along with that, if we've got a good bloom of phytoplankton, we can produce more pounds of fish per acre. We've just got to make sure to kind of manage that phytoplankton so that we don't wind up with a shutdown of that bloom. Because once again, if that bloom shuts down, it's going to suck up a lot of oxygen as it decomposes.
Yeah. And before we transition about the food chain, if you have aquatic weeds, you can contact your county extension agent. In Blount County, it'd be me. Each county has an extension agent that can help you out in all 95 counties. If that county agent doesn't know, they're going to reach out to a professional like Justin. If you're in West Tennessee, Craig Kimbrough. If you're in Middle Tennessee, and Manny Bedwell here in East Tennessee, they have training and knowledge that can help you with that. And we follow strict guidelines from the University of Tennessee. We have a pond management publication. We have even the weed manual, which is like my Bible. I keep it on the front of my truck in the window. It covers, a lot of pasture weeds and everything. But there's also still an aquatic section, right, Justin, that we can make recommendations based on. And a lot goes into that. Just mentioned alkalinity. We also look at your objectives, and we don't want to kill all the vegetation out of the plant. We want to see your threshold, right, Justin, of what you can handle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
just because you've got weeds doesn't mean that you need to treat them.
No.
I mean, some of those are going to be beneficial to your fishery.
Mm-hmm. And weed control starts with pond construction. So
yes,
that's a good point. When you build a pond, make sure that you build the correct slopes, and you'll be surprised what an old wading bird like a GBH, a great or that big heron that can bring into your pond.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for pond construction. I mean, your pond management starts before your pond ever gets built. So you want to take into consideration, if you're building a pond, we've got to take into consideration the overall watershed that's going to be flowing into that. What's that water flowing off of? Is it coming off of crop ground? Is it coming out of pastures, off of residential lawns, out of forests? All of that is going to play into what kind of a nutrient load is washing into your pond. And if you've got really high density nutrient loads, you can wind up with some severe weed problems. You can wind up with some real headaches. And then whenever you're building that pond, make sure that your edges are deep. Like to try to see relatively steep edges, at least 18 to 24 inches deep, to help try to manage some of that sunlight getting to the bottom. And then we also want to make sure that when they are building the levee, that they compact that soil with something more than just a dozer. So I know lots and lots of people that build ponds with dozers, and they work out great for a few years, but then we start seeing water sifting through and percolating through those levees. And that's because dozers are not built to compact soil. They're actually meant to do right the opposite of soil compaction. They're meant for traction for that machine to be able to push stuff. So if we are building a new pond, work with somebody that's going to be coming out there and using a sheep's foot roller or a compactor to be able to get good soil compaction, because that soil compaction and the soil makeup is what is going to keep that water from leaking through your levee and causing some pretty severe problems down the road. Once you've got a leaky pond, there's not any guaranteed fixes. You can throw all the money and research-based information you want to at it, but once that pond's got a leak in it, man, it's a nightmare to fix them. So you're a whole lot better off to do it right on the front end.
Yeah, and if you don't install a way to drain that pond, that's going to really limit you to of what you can do, because a lot of people build ponds without a draining system, and you can siphon it, but if you can't drain it, your management is going to be very difficult. I'll say two things about ponds that I won't make Justin say it because he's a fisheries specialist, but two of my biggest things is landowners would get excited when I'd come out to a pond visit and say, "Oh, this is a great pond. It's spring fed." That is the worst thing that you could tell me. I could say that because I'm not the fisheries agent, but people tell me that like they're proud of it, and it's great, which it's great. It'll have water in it. But a lot of times I find that's the only advantage to a spring-fed pond. It'll have water in it. A lot of times springs are cold, especially up here in East Tennessee. We have some trout country up here. The water is really cold coming out of these springs, and we'll talk about it in a minute about what kind of fish goes in a pond. But again, if you get spring-fed, you can't drain it. And also, it has moving water in it, and you're limited on what kind of pesticides you can use in it. And you're limited about, a lot of algae control, but Yeah, it'll have water in it. The second thing is I hate getting leaky pond questions because there's not any good answer that I can tell you as a landowner, as a pond owner, about a leaky pond.
Yeah.
There's no just exact, yeah, do this. We provide a lot of solutions in extension. There's not a whole lot of solution to a leaky pond, especially if you can't drain it. And I've seen people try to compact them with water still in it. And, there's this thing called bentonite that people can buy. It's very expensive. But if you see the success rate on something like bentonite, I think when I was doing fisheries work, it was about 30%. And I think that was pretty high. And you're spending a lot of money on this stuff. So when you're building a pond, build it correctly, save you a lot of heartache. But if you have leaky ponds, we'll help you. Just know that it takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And really, you just about have to locate where that pond is leaking from. And Justin can speak to this. There's things that you can do to kind of minimize that. Don't plant trees on your levee.
Yes.
Do some varmint control with these groundhogs and things that build holes on your levees. Those are two things that Justin probably don't need to say, but I'll say it that those are the two most difficult things that I had to deal with as far as working with ponds. But Justin mentioned the food chain, so I like to think of a pond as a little ecosystem in a test tube. You've got a really small ecosystem, and everything that you do will have a dramatic effect on it. So tell us about what fish we should have in our ponds, and a little bit about what goes into stocking rates and how we help people with that.
So yeah, I'll talk on that. But first, I just want to echo what you were saying. Another really good way to try and prevent having leaks in the first place is maintenance, performing regular maintenance, keeping your levees clean. Lord knows you really do not want trees growing on your levee, because if they blow over, they're going to pull up a big root wad and you're going to have a leak. I had a call about that last week. And even if they don't blow over, if they die and you cut them down as those roots rot, you're going to have channels for that water to run through. And trees on a levee are never a good idea. Just don't do it. And then on the varmint control side of things, snapping turtles are good to burrow into a pond levee. Groundhogs, and here in West Tennessee, the bane of my existence, those cotton picking armadillos, God, I hate them. They're terrible. They dig worse than a groundhog. Yeah. If you've got an armadillo, I recommend lead poisoning. That's the best recommendation I've got for those.
I'm laughing because we're very fortunate that we don't have many over here yet. But
yeah, I pray that they don't make it that
I remember
far.
I had a friend that called me since I moved back, and he's like, Ronnie, you will not believe what I just saw. And I thought he was going to tell me a mountain lion or something. We're starting to see some of those bigger. So I get all excited. He's like, you will not believe this, but someone hit an armadillo on Chapman Highway. And he thought he had really found something. I said, yeah, I've dealt with a lot of those things. So there are some here. There's nothing like what there is in West Tennessee. But those things, they're very docile. And one of the worst times I was scared in Deerwood was because of armadillo. Those things are about blind. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting on the ground hunting, and one came up out of a hole and actually ran across my Richie leg. And oh man. But anyways, so what about fish in the pond? This is actually some of the stuff that's enjoyed working with me. I always love talking about fishing and fishery. So let's talk about your fish in your pond, Justin.
Yes, sir. So as far as fish in a pond and fish pond population management, that's probably my second most common phone call aside from pond vegetation. Here in West Tennessee, and I would venture to say it's probably going to be about the same there in East Tennessee. Most of what we're seeing in ponds, or what we're recommending, is largemouth bass, bluegill, red ear sunfish. Catfish are good to put in the pond as well if you're interested in fishing catfish. We only recommend using channel catfish. In most cases, I'm not going to say all cases because I have seen it, but in most cases, channel catfish are not going to reproduce effectively in a pond setting, which that helps to aid in the management of those fish. If you stock 100 of them in a 1 acre pond, you've got 100 catfish in there, and you can kind of figure that as you pull them out. Not to say that that's our stocking ratio on those, but usually we're looking at 50 to 75 per acre on catfish. I do get a lot of questions about putting crappie in ponds, and I don't recommend it. I just simply do not recommend putting crappie in ponds, especially if you're looking to try to manage largemouth bass, or anything else for that matter. Crappie will become very problematic. And the issue with crappie is that they spawn earlier than our other fish in those ponds. They reproduce at a rate that is absolutely astronomical. And of course, they're predatory fish, so everything smaller than them, they're going to eat it. So they're spawning before your bass do. You've got lots of crappie larvae that's already out and hungry by the time that your bass, your bluegill, and red ear spawn, and they're going to be eating the daylights out of those bass, bluegill, and red ear larvae as well. Of course, as they continue to grow, they're going to be eating all those fingerlings and really hitting the bait fish population pretty hard. And there's been several times that I've gone to look at ponds that people have stopped crappie in that they may have had a well-balanced pond beforehand. And now, because of the reproductive rate and the tendency of those fish to eat everything smaller than them, they now have a 2-acre pond stocked with crappie that are all about yay long, bug-eyed, severely stunted, and severely overpopulated. And in a situation like that, the best thing you can do is to rotin on it, kill everything, and start again from square one, because essentially you've ruined your pond by putting crappie in it. So people ask a lot of times, how big of a pond do I need really to be able to stock crappie effectively? And really, if you're die-hard gung-ho stocking crappie, I would say don't put them in anything less than a 20-acre lake, and at that, be cautious. So I just really do not like seeing crappie in a pond, because they are very, very difficult to manage just because of their reproductive capabilities and their voracious nature. Now, if we're talking about a well-balanced pond, it's hard to beat a largemouth bass, bluegill, and red ear fishery. On something like that, you can look at stocking either 500 bluegill per acre to 50 to 100 bass per acre, or we can look at stocking about 300 bluegill, 200 red ear sunfish, and then 50 to 100 bass fingerlings. On those bluegill and red ear, I like stocking them in the fall. October is a good time to get them in, let them go ahead and get established. And then the following year in April or May, then you can go ahead and stock your bass fingerlings in there. By that time, your bait fish have got established. They're going to be reproducing, so you'll have much more increased forage fish for those bass fingerlings to give them plenty to eat on and grow as time goes on. And so with that, if we're stocking fish, we've also got to keep in mind, like Ronnie said, a pond is basically an ecosystem in a test tube. It's kind of like trying to fit people into a phone booth. You can only put so many of them in there before it gets too overcrowded. So as we're stocking, we've got to keep in mind that to keep a pond balanced, we've got to fish that thing out, and we've got to remove fish. I know I grew up watching Hank Parker and Bill Dance on television, and they were real big about catch and release. That's fantastic if you're on a big reservoir like Kentucky Lake or Watts Bar, but that does not work well in a confined ecosystem like a pond. You'll get overpopulated pretty quick if you're doing catch and release only. So on a deal like that, I would recommend keeping an eye on things. Once your bass are getting, once they've been in there for 2 or 3 years and you're seeing 8 to 10 inch bass, start removing some of those fish. I always tell people hot grease is an excellent management tool for a pond. A fish fry is a great thing. So with bass, we're going to be looking at removing 20 to 25 pounds of bass per acre per year just to maintain balance. Now, if we're overpopulated, we're going to take out more than 25 pounds of bass per year. But if we're looking at maintaining balance from the get-go, 20 to 25 pounds of bass per year, and we're going to be targeting those, 8-inch fish to a 13-inch fish, because I refer to those as an intermediate sized bass. They're kind of like a teenage boy that's hit puberty. They want to eat every cotton picking thing that they can because they're looking to grow. And because of that, they're really going to be putting a hurting on your bait fish population. And they're all going to be in direct competition for the same buffet. So pulling out some of those fish that's, 8 to 13 inches in size, you can help free up some of your bait fish, help free up some space for those other bass to be able to grow and reach higher relative weights. That's what I like to shoot for on that. And then with bluegill and red ear, they reproduce pretty prolifically as well. So once they're big enough to go in a fryer, pull them rascals out. You can catch a whole mess of them things for weeks on end and really not hurt your population too awful bad. Once those bluegill hit 7.5 inches, 8 inches, for the most part, most of your bass in the pond's not going to be able to eat them anyway, so they've kind of outlived their usefulness as a bait fish. And your other bait fish will be reproducing after about a year within that pond.
Mm-hmm.
So
so I love crappie. Don't get me wrong. Crappie is my favorite thing to eat, but like Justin said, they have no business in a farm pond or recreational pond. And that hurts me to say because I am a big crappie fisherman. Love the way they eat, love the way they taste. But those recommendations that were just said about harvesting fish, that's very important. Bill Dance is on TV, and we all grew up watching him. But eat your fish. You want the great recreational activity out there, a good fish fry. And also, that's best case scenario. So like Justin said, if you have overpopulation, you're going to have to do some things different to control that. And that's where extension can come in and help you out. But before I forget, what's your favorite way to have catfish, Justin? A good West Tennessee fish fry.
So, see, I'm a little bit, I guess I'm going to spout some blasphemy here. I ate so much catfish growing up. I mean, it was every Friday night we were eating, fried catfish. And so in 30 years, I've gotten a little bit burned out on fried catfish. So what I actually like to do is, I like to take an aluminum pan or something, take a catfish fillet, and I'll put, a whole bunch of butter in with it. I'll put a little bit of lemon pepper on it, and I'll actually set it on the grill, and I'll cook it on the grill. That way we've got a little bit of smoke in there with some lemon pepper and butter on those catfish fillets. And I actually like that better than, just deep fried catfish, because I have eaten so cotton picking much of it over the years. So
I will say
it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I will say I didn't really get into catfish. I thought I knew how to cook catfish until I moved to West Tennessee. It's a much bigger thing in West Tennessee.
Man, we're home of the world's biggest fish fry. What you talking
about? I'll give it to our West Tennessee folks. They know how to fry catfish. Growing up, we ate fish, but it was nothing to the degree. I mean, the popular thing, like Justin says, on Friday nights, you go look to eat fish and white beans somewhere. The first time,
slaw and hush puppies.
And there's different kinds of slaws. In East Tennessee, it's the mayonnaise base, and some of these places in West Tennessee gets into this vinegar based.
That's the only way to go.
And so it's a regional thing out there. If you're ever in West Tennessee, go to a fish fry, and you'll go to restaurants. It looks like it's in somebody's house, or one of the best fish fry places. And where I lived at near Homewall, it looked like it was in somebody's trailer. You walked up and got your plate, but much bigger thing out there. We fry fish. We have some good catfish places here, but much bigger thing out there. And I never ate white beans with catfish until I moved to West Tennessee. So it's kind of like a combo thing. So, and some of our lakes in East Tennessee, unfortunately, have advisories about eating catfish with heavy metals, PCBs, and Fort Loudon, I think, is the most recent that looks like that. But I grew up eating fish out of that lake, but not older catfish. These older catfish, they have different biology, different habits. So they're a little bit different than eating other fish, but not as prevalent. And the Tennessee River is a little different out there in Benton County than it is in Knox County.
That's
so
for sure.
A little bit wider, a lot of commercial fishing going on out there. It's a good time. And there's other little things. I need to do a podcast episode where we just talk about the difference in the East and West, because I never heard of chocolate gravy till I moved to West Tennessee either. I know that don't have nothing to do about fisheries, but
yeah, you lived a deprived life if you didn't know nothing about no chocolate gravy.
I didn't. That wasn't the thing where I grew up at. It might be in other places in East Tennessee, but when I saw them eating, someone that told me about chocolate gravy, and I said, "Yeah, that might be good on ice cream." And no, they had it on their sausage, their biscuits, their bacon.
Yes.
I never got into that like I did the fishing, but it's pretty cool to see these regional things. But anyways, back to fishing. It all depends on your objective. These fishery agents and the county agents are going to take in account your objectives. If you just want your grandbabies to go down there and catch a fish every cast, some of these overstocked bass ponds are great for that. You're going to throw out any lure that moves, you're going to get hit, and you can keep that fish and fry it up, and that'll be helping you take it out. Or if you want to catch trophy bass, if you got a big fishery enough to catch trophy bass, Justin may come and tell you to stock 25 or 50 instead of 100, and come get them low. And there's a lot of things you can do. I know of a game preserve in East Tennessee. They actually lower their pond and start all over every year, a couple of years. They'll lower their ponds and let people catch those bass and let the bass slam those bait fish. And it's almost like they're hunting in pairs. It's crazy to see. It looks like jaws closing in on those minnows. But they'll start over, and they have it where they buy fish from a distributor and they get all female bass. And they'll stock those female bass because they grow a little bit quicker, and they don't lay these little young buck bass that you see that overtake the ponds. But don't be sad that you can't have crappie, but because those red ear sunfish and those bluegills, oh man, they're just as good when they get fillet size.
They eat just as well. And on the topic of red ears, bluegills, and catfish, if we're looking to raise those, especially if we're really wanting to focus on those species, supplemental feeding can be a fantastic tool to utilize. Floating catfish feed, I think a lot of what we see over here in West Tennessee, I know co-op carries, I think, a 32% protein floating catfish feed. And so with catfish, their rate of gain is almost a 2-to-1. If they eat 2 pounds of feed, they're gaining a pound of flesh, across the board on catfish. So you can get some outstanding feed efficiencies on some of these fish with a good supplemental feed. The thing to keep in mind is that if we're feeding them supplemental, we don't want to overfeed them, because at that point you're wasting money and you're adding unnecessary nutrients to your water. With a floating feed, broadcast out just enough feed for them to clean up within a 5-minute period. If it's out there longer than 5 minutes, then they don't need it. You're wasting money and causing yourself problems. The other thing to keep in mind about feeding is that the metabolism of those fish fluctuates with water temperature. Once we start getting into the colder weather, late October, early November, really there's no sense feeding them, because their metabolism is going to slow down. So we can, cut out the feed from late fall until early spring. And then once water temperatures come back up around 70 degrees, their metabolism comes back up, and we can go back to supplemental feeding on some of those fish to get a little bit added growth on bluegill and red ear and catfish. So if that's your objective. But Ronnie hit the nail on the head. Every pond's different. Even if you've got similar management objectives, you've got 2 different ponds, it's going to be two different ways to manage it, just simply because each population of fish and each pond is going to be just a little bit different. So we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. And so before we transition to our final topic, tell me why I just can't go out here. If I'm in East Tennessee, why can't I go to Douglas or Tellico Lake? And if I catch a nice bass and I can throw her in the live well, or if I catch a big blue cat or a channel cat, why can't I just throw that in my pond?
So there's 2 reasons that I give for this. And so the first one I'll go with is the technical legality of it all. Technically, these fish that are in our public waterways and whatnot are property of the state of Tennessee. And so to catch, let's say we're catching bass out here on Fort Loudon and we want to move them over here to our pond, technically those fish are property of the state, and to move them into your private pond is illegal. Now, I've never known of anybody persecuted for that. I'm not regulatory, so it's I just simply
we don't want to be. We don't want to be.
I don't want to be.
We don't want to be.
I'll leave that to the WRA. I like to go out there and actually enjoy working with landowners and everything. But I'm just advising, do not do that for the legal aspect of it. But to me, and probably more importantly, if you're catching fish out here in these public waterways, or catching fish out of your neighbor's pond in a private pond, and then moving it over to your place, There's a good potential that you could move in some disease or a parasite or a problem that can very quickly spread throughout that enclosed ecosystem. And once you've got a disease or a parasite, you've got it. It's hard to get rid of them. It's like what happens in Vegas don't always stay in Vegas. If you're bringing stuff into your pond, you can wind up with some diseases that you just simply are stuck with at that point and can absolutely ruin your fishery. Prime example of this, there was a pond here in West Tennessee, I won't mention the county, that the landowner was catching some bass and noticed some issues with them, brought them into the county agent, and they got me some samples of it. It turned out that they had gill lice. So there's this parasitic louse that will get in there and attach itself to the gills of these bass and other species in the pond, and was causing some problems there. And so we got to looking at it and asking questions, and the landowner had been, out on Tennessee, the Tennessee River, Kentucky Lake area, catching bass, caught some nice ones, and thought, I'm just going to take these home and put them in my pond, and had actually moved a parasite into his 1 acre pond. And of course, parasite in a 1 acre confined population, that goes around pretty quickly. So now most of his fish are ridden with parasites, and they've got some problems. And so there's not a real good way to treat that either. And if there is a good way to treat it, a lot of times with these things, it's not necessarily economically feasible to do so. So you're a whole lot better off ordering your fish from a reputable hatchery. Get your fish from them where they've had them kind of vetted and raised in a confined area where they know that everything is healthy. You're not bringing in parasites, diseases, and pathogens, and your population should remain healthy for a much longer period of time. That's not to say that a blue heron can't bring something in that will spread, but you're going to be a whole lot less likely to get those parasites if you're not bringing in fish from outside sources like that.
Yeah. So, first thing, should I name this podcast? What does Vegas and stocking ponds have in common? Right? No.
Yeah. I reckon that would be an appropriate name.
Yeah. So, the reason too, these fish that we catch in these big reservoirs, they're open water's moving. Even in reservoirs, you have a dam system that brings water, so they can get rid of, or they can live with these parasites better than they can in a smaller pond that has stagnation of water.
Yes.
Where they're not getting that. But interesting topic that you bring this up, but you may know this, but the North American game model was formed by the reason that you're talking about. So back in the day when our ancestors were in Europe and during the medieval ages and things, when you had kings and you had serfs, so all the wildlife and fish belonged to the king. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't go out there and catch the king's fish. You couldn't go out there and kill the king's stag, because that was the king's stag. So founding fathers of wildlife management like Leo Leopold or Aldo Leopold, excuse me, they were the founding fathers of wildlife management, where the wildlife, the game, and the fisheries, they belong to the people, the state. So the people. So when you see a deer or you see a fish in the water, that is the state's or the people's wildlife or fish. It is not yours until you harvest it legally and you have a tag for it.
Right.
So it's a public trust, a public interest. So that's a little bit different system. That's just some history on that. I couldn't imagine not being able to hunt or being able to fish, but at one time in this world, they all belong to the king. They all belong to the government. We just couldn't partake in some of these activities. So it's very interesting. That brings up a good point that it is for the enjoyment of the public. So
yes. That could get me on a whole other soapbox.
No, yeah. So and there's some weeds in that. There's some weeds in that. If that 10-pound bass is in your pond, is that really my bass too? But it's just like a deer. If it's on a college campus, let's say if there's a deer out at, well, Ellington's gone, but the plant biotech building, it's roaming around on campus, or that time that a bear is that's not UT's bear. That's the public's bear. So it's kind of a novel idea to look at. But our last topic, so we talked about stocking fish, and you want to check, make sure it's balanced. There's different ways that we check for balance to save on time. There's seining, which county agent can do, or the fishery agents to check young of the year to make sure that we have intermediate bass, young of the year bass and bluegill have a good age structure. And there's also times where we can do electrofishing. We have 3 shock boats that's available to extension, one in east, one in middle, one in west. So Justin, tell us about when you want to use that shock boat and how that works.
Yeah, I'd have to say that's probably my favorite part of this job is that, I get paid to go fishing sometimes. And so with the shock boat, what it is, we've got a boat with some generators on it and anodes and electrodes that run out and run electricity into the water. And we can put up to about 1,000 volts of electricity into the water to shock these fish and bring them up. So a lot of people ask, are we killing the fish? No, we're not killing them. We're running electricity at a level that simply stuns them. These fish become stunned. Their swim bladder will cause them to float up to the top. We'll net them off the front of the boat. We'll put them into a live well, bring them over to the bank, run about 10-minute transects. That way we can get those fish back in the water without injury to them. Once we get a representative sample of that pond, we'll take them to the bank, weigh them, measure them, record what species that they are, record any kind of issues that we might see with those fish. If we're seeing, lesions or parasites or problems that need to be noted, we can make note of that. And we'll just take those transects and samples from a few sections within the pond to look at the overall population makeup. So what we're looking for from an overarching standpoint is what species are present, what is the ratios that we're seeing on those species. So are we seeing, ideally I like to see about, 10 bluegill to every 2 or 3, every 1 or 2 bass. So what's our forage fish, predator fish ratios looking like? What's the overall health of the fish that we're seeing there? So are we seeing lots of underweight bass, underweight bluegill and red ear? And then from that, we can kind of piece together a management plan based on the observations that we're seeing there. And so that's kind of the way that works. It's in my opinion, it's quite a bit of fun to be able to go out there and, run electricity and watch these fish boil up next to the boat. So we see all kinds of
in that service that they can perform, obviously, your county agent needs to come look at your pond, determine if that's an option. Sometimes it's better just the seine. You can keep a krill or like a krill record of what you catch. And, we don't want to shock every pond, if it's hard accessible or if it's small. And there's also a fee to it. Now, we have to keep this boat operable. If you've ever owned a boat, you know that there's maintenance on it. So I believe it's $500 now. Isn't that right, Justin?
Yes, it is $500 to come out and do an electrofishing assessment. Like Ronnie said, if you've ever owned a boat, you know that it is a money pit. And we're traveling long distances, usually pulling a boat equipment. At the end of the day, I'm still a full-time county agriculture agent for Benton County, just like what Ronnie is there in Blount County. And the fisheries is added to that. So in addition to full-time work at the county level, Manny Bedwell's the same way. He's a full-time county agent. All the fisheries work is in addition to that. And so our county work does have to come first. So that's to kind of try to help balance things out, make sure that we've got funding to be able to maintain the program and things like that. So, and like Ronnie said, not every pond needs to have a boat put in it and shocked. A lot of times we cannot access these ponds, especially these smaller ponds, but we can still come out and do a visual assessment or a seine count or creel count to be able to figure that out as well. Usually, if we're going to be running a shock boat, we're not going to see much of anything different from what you're seeing if you've been fishing it regularly. If you're fishing it regularly and keeping up with what you're catching and seeing, usually that's going to be mirrored with the shock boat assessment also.
Yeah, so as agents, we get into a little bit of everything. So, Justin, he deals with livestock calls in East County. He deals with row crop, sick plants. So does Manny Bedwell, our guy. Just to show you the diversity, this week alone, I've looked at sick azalea plants. I've had to deal with lawn and turf, growing fescue, growing Bermuda, killing Bermuda grass. Looking at some insects on spruce and dealing with an unruly bear. A guy had a bear that came visiting a yard and had to give him some publications on that. So it's very diverse. I've left lunch and come back. There'd be a snake in the bucket sitting outside my office. Someone won't know what kind of snake it is. So we deal with a little bit of everything. Also, even though that we're not 100% 4-H, we still have youth responsibilities. I'm sure Justin helps out with some of his youth activities. They have a big fair in Benton County that just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, wasn't
it? Yes, and I guess I probably shouldn't say thankfully, but I don't do a whole heck of a lot with the fair. I will admit that, but we do have a wildlife judging team here in the county that I try to. Even though I'm not 4-H, I do try to go a little bit of an extra mile for a wildlife judging team. That's near and dear to my heart, as much as I hate to admit it. So I do like to train up those kids and try to get them familiarized more so with wildlife habitat management and judging that habitat. And hopefully one of these days I'm going to take those kids to nationals, but that's yet to be seen. They're still in junior high school, so
that's a tough contest. That is a tough contest. So. We hope to get that started in Blount County this next judging season. That's usually in the spring. So we hope to have that one. Right now, Blount County's doing a grilling team. So if you got kids that want to cook, learn how to grill, we do that. And we're also about to start shooting sports. So I'm just telling you all that to let you know that we're not dedicated to 100% fisheries, but we're here to help and just understand that we dabble in a little bit of everything. So
yeah, and I'd like to put in a plug for your grilling team there. That's a really good contest for kids. I mean, that's some life skills that we're talking about there. But as a new parent, the way I look at it is, you're teaching your kid how to cook meats on a charcoal grill. That's something that translates very quickly to them fixing supper at home, hopefully. So
that's right.
That can be real handy, especially if they get good at it.
That's right. I know it's tough teaching kids how to grill steaks and I can't taste it. So
yeah,
that's a challenge. So, well, Justin, thank you for coming by. Thank you for sitting in our cerebral rocking chair on our episode. And
yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So up next, we'll be talking about current events and our scary section, our invasive species watch. So all right, Justin did an excellent job telling us about pond management and how we can help you in extension. So if you have pond needs, fisheries needs, contact your county agent. We can get you in touch with our Eastern Region Fisheries Agent, Manny Bedwell. He's out of Morristown, so if you need that service, we could help you out there. Piece of trivia today. I like to do trivia every now and then about the podcast. So there is a fin on catfish, salmon, and trout that other fish do not have. Can you tell me the name of that fin? Okay. There's a fin on salmon, trout, and catfish that other fish do not have. If you can figure that out, write in the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, Give us a call or email me at rcowan2@utk.edu for podcast trivia. What fin does salmon, trout, and catfish have that other fish do not have? It's a pretty interesting subject. So a little fishy trivia there. So staying on the natural resource theme, we have bears. You heard me talk about, Justin, we had some unruly bears around and about. So you can go to bearwise.org and they'll tell you what bears do in September. So in September, bears eating goes into hyperdrive. That's probably why we're starting to see more bear around in the foothills. Biological clocks are ticking. The quest for calories keep bears active and foraging up to 20 hours a day. Our bears don't truly hibernate. They do something called torpor, but they do hibernate. The ones that even don't hibernate, they still eat because of that biological time clock. Fruits and nuts, they're looking for berries, soft mass. September also brings a lot of hard mass, including acorns, beech nuts, chestnuts, chica pins, black walnuts, butternut, hickory nuts, pecans, and a lot of oak trees. So the fun fact about oak trees is oak trees produce more nuts than all other nut trees combined, both wild and cultivated. No wonder bears hang out in oak forests and on slopes in the fall. So breast nesting bears are also beginning climbing into beech trees in early September, making themselves comfortable to sit and eat. They also nest in oak trees and eat acorns all day, and they hate to leave any food behind. So the almost pregnant female bears that mated in early summer can gain up to 50% of their weight, and the eating is good. The more weight they gain, the better chances their cubs will survive and thrive. So they're out on the hunt too. And remember, if you're heading in the woods, remember that bears are moving about many hours of the day. So pay attention to your surroundings and be a good loser. If a bear beats you to your trout fishing spot, or if it beats you to a berry patch, be sure to be a good loser. Give that up. Do not interact with them. So it's very active in September. Another cool thing that's happening in September is it is the month of love for elk. So if you're in East Tennessee, elk are in the rut. You can hear those big bulls bugling. It is quite a feat to see. You can go to North Cumberland Wildlife Management area and hear that, see that, have a good time with those big bull elk bugling. If you've never heard one, it is quite an experience. So you can check that out this month. All right, with that scary music approaches, you know it's time to talk about our big invasive. So our invasive of the day is the Alabama bass, staying aquatic themed. It is the Alabama bass, a new invader to Tennessee. Tennessee has not been immune to aquatic invasive species. A species introduced outside of its native range can have a negative impact on native populations. There are several examples that come to mind. Carp, invasive carp, zebra mussels, and all others. But recently, the Alabama bass has become a problem here in Tennessee. They have the potential to alter native bass populations in Tennessee. Anglers should be concerned about Alabama bass because they can impact large and smallmouth bass populations, and they can develop quickly for a short period of time and produce some large fish. However, the rapidly changes and the population increases and become overcrowding, as what Justin mentioned earlier, so resulting in higher number of small fish. They can also hybridize with smallmouth bass and drastically reduce some populations, and that should be a big deal. Tennessee is renowned for its smallmouth bass fishery. We actually have the world record smallmouth bass caught. So be on the lookout for this. What do they look like? Unfortunately, they're nearly identical in appearance to native spotted bass. Physical characteristics are often indistinguishable between species, and they often rely on genetic analysis to differentiate between species. However, Do not move bass. In order to be successful stopping the spread of bass, the responsibility lies with those that monitor and transport live fish. So again, another segue to what Justin was saying is don't move fish, folks. It's just not worth it. If you observe illegal stocking and you want to report it, you should report it to your local TWRA regional office. We are in the East Tennessee Region 4, and they're at 330 Wildlife Way, Morristown, Tennessee, and you can contact them at 423-587-7037. So let's put a stop to moving, illegally moving fish. All right, it's downtown. We're going downtown to see what's going on in the East Tennessee Mountain Land. Something really cool coming up here. It is Sturgeon Fest 2023. You can register for free. It's free on October the 7th. And they will actually let you release a baby sturgeon into the French Broad River. So you have to register. There are 1,000 baby sturgeons to release. Register for a time slot and have a lot of fun in rehabilitating our stream. It is at Seven Islands State Birding Park, and you can find out more information if you type in sevenislands.org/sturgeonfest. So I plan on being there. Hopefully come out for a good time and help for a great cause. There'll be vendors and a lot going on that day, so check it out. Sturgeon Fest. All right. Some other things that we have going on. We have a big meeting coming up called 4-H Shooting Sports Interest Meeting. It is Tuesday, September the 26th, 5 o'clock p.m. here at your extension office at 1219 MacArthur Road, Maryville, Tennessee. It'll begin at 5 p.m. and it's open to all potential participants ages 8 to 18. Potential coaches and volunteers, and potential partners. So we're trying to get it off the ground. We want to have a well-rounded shooting sports program that offers archery, shotgun, air rifle, BB, small bore. So we're trying to make sure that there's a great enough interest in identifying some key partners and coaches. We need volunteers. This is volunteer-led. It's a lot of fun. It teaches life skills, safety, mental aptitude, and it's just a great program to get your youth involved. No experience is necessary. So if you never held one of these tools, you can learn. We'll teach you everything that you need to know. So come on out, register with us. You can register by emailing me at rcowan2@utk.edu or give us a call at 865-982-6430. We still have time to register. So if you have youth that are interested in being on a competitive shooting team, learning the discipline of archery, shotgun, air rifle, BB, and small bore, we are focused on building championship kids, not necessarily championship shooters, but this is a great way to get noticed. You get scholarships, possibility to be on collegiate teams. So another opportunity for our youth to be active in the community. The next program that I want to highlight is our Welcome Home series. It is a new series. It's called Welcome Home to Your Tennessee Garden. It is a gardening series, and we meet every Monday in October, and it's called Welcome to Your Tennessee Garden. It's on Mondays in October, 3:30 to 5:30. And we do various topics. This is targeted to people that want to learn how to plant gardens, fix their landscape, lawns, ornamental plantings, beautification of their property. It could be for folks that are moving into our beautiful area, or it could be people that was born and raised here that just wish to learn more. So we'll be covering soil testing and amending the soils, landscape assessment and planning, garden planting and cover crops, identifying and controlling weeds, and we'll also help you select the best trees and shrubs for your needs. We only have 20 spots available, but you get a free soil test if you register. Registration is $45 for this whole program. You get classes every week in October on Mondays, 3:30 to 5:30. They're at the Extension Office, 1219 MacArthur Road. And if you're interested in learning more about gardening in your home or lawns, you can register at https://tiny.utk.edu/welcome-home-garden. Or you can see our Facebook page. We'll have the link posted. Or if you see this flyer here, you can scan this green box. It takes you right to our site. You can pay online, register. Again, only 20 spots open. It'll be a great time. You'll get all kinds of resources. There'll be hands-on activity. You'll hear it from specialists. They will teach you how to make your place more of a home with landscaping and gardening. So check it out. It'll be a good time. Spots will be going quickly, so make sure you contact us, okay? And that's it for today's show. Join us next week. We'll have back-to-back week episodes. We will be doing green and white. It is almost the National 4-H Week. So in honor of the head, heart, hands, and health, we'll be talking to Blount County's two 4-H agents that do a wonderful job here and what 4-H has to offer. We'll be green and white that day, so make sure you stop by and see us next week on the podcast Appalachia at Ya special 4-H edition. You all enjoy this fall weather today and have a great weekend. Go Vols, and we hope to hear from you soon. Y'all come back and see us.